Yeah, we are good to go.
All right, great. Welcome in, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Doug Slohm, and I am the Vice President of Supply Operations here at Internet Research Bureau. And today I'm going to be the moderator for this conversation. And this will be the first webinar that IRB is hosting in a monthly series of webinars. And today we are going to talk about keeping respondent panels clean and compliant. Today, we're going to have a great panel of guests, and we're going to discuss panel management for online sample, along with data quality from panels and how these factors are key drivers of success in market research. And each of our guests today play different roles in the research lifecycle, and this will give everyone on the call a full perspective of the topic from the data source all the way to the end client. So let me introduce the panel. First, we have Anastasia Chernyakova, and she is the Net Revenue Insights Lead for PepsiCo's Walker Crisps division. And she's going to give the client perspective in our conversation. To give us the perspective of research agencies, we have two guests on today. The first being Pete Mullarkey, who is the Insight Network Manager for B2B International. And joining him as well is Steve Mail, who is the Executive Vice President of Innovation and Strategic Partnerships at the Logit Group. And finally, we have our very own Ashutosh Singh, who is the founder and president of IRB. He's going to give us a perspective of data collection providers that supply data from the front end. So today's session, we're going to include an open discussion around the topic of data quality and compliance in online market research. This is going to be a 30-minute conversation, and we will have a Q&A session at the end where questions can come in from the audience. Please feel free to drop those into the Teams chat window. We'll pick out a few and have our panel respond to some of those questions. So that's it. Without further ado, let's get into the first question of the day, and this is going to go to Anastasia. So I wanted to ask and start the conversation off with the topic of how you as an end client are able to ensure that the insights you're pulling from market research are actionable and reliable for your company. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. And actually, I believe there are two questions. One is about actionability and another is about reliability. Let me approach them a little bit differently because what is actionability for me is to make sure that whatever I am researching, I'm commissioning as a leader for snacks business, PepsiCo Insights in the UK, is really make sure that it's really fitting to a growth strategy of each particular brand. I'll give you an example. We've got two lovely brands in the UK, Walkers, in other countries maybe Lay's. We've got Pipers. Completely different strategies. It means that in terms of actionability, we need to make sure that in our panel we include pub owners with very different profiles. People who are liquid-led, who are meal-led, who is affluent, who is not affluent. It's only if we're very clear with audience that we're researching, we'll be able to apply it and really drive forward our business. That's why for me, in terms of actionability, make sure that whatever the sample we've got, we're collecting lots of information about our panelists, about the respondents. It's exactly what IB agency is doing, providing information, 360 information about respondents. It's really helping us to be more targeted, to be more focused, and by the end of the day, to win with premises for our products. In terms of reliability, is a little bit different. For me, because I'm working a lot with away from home space, and it's a huge priority for PepsiCo as our organization for now and for future. It's about making sure I'm working with a provider of the data that's reliable, that really I am sure that respondents, they're really meeting criteria that are requested. And again, the area of B2B is really gray area in companies like PepsiCo because majority of salespeople, they grew up from organized trade. They don't know much about away from home. They don't know much about B2B. And the trouble that they've got their own, it's not the trouble, it's great that they've got their own opinions. But for me, as a person who really should come with some, I would say, true point of view of my end shoppers and customers, I need to make sure that I'm 100%, 200% sure with the data that I'm approaching my CEO or my CMO. And exactly, it's very important that reliability of the panel is extremely critical, because if we don't have good data in, we have quite bad data out.
Yep, that is very relevant. I hear those types of points a lot. So thank you very much for emphasizing that. I think to segue off of that point, we can maybe go to Steve first, because it sounds like what Anastasia is saying is that to get the reliable panel data, they're putting the trust in where it's coming from. And so Steve, acting as an intermediary between panel and the end client, what are some quality control measures that you either have in place or you think should be in place that are standard in order to give confidence to clients like Anastasia, make sure that they're confident in the research they're doing?
Right. And I like that question. A lot of times we think about data, we use the term data quality, but I think there's actually two components to it. There's data quality and there's data integrity, and they're two different things. So I think when we think poor data quality, we tend to think of bad actors in our space, people who are trying to manipulate, work their way into surveys that don't have the criteria that they need to be part of a survey or give their response. But I think a lot of times too, we also see issues where we're getting the right respondent and they're giving us poor quality data. And sometimes that's based upon the design or layout of the survey, the questions being asked. And other times it's just the constraints of the survey, what we're asking the user. Like if we're asking, a 25-minute survey, we're seeing fatigue, the quality of answers are deprecating throughout the course of that survey. So I think there's a lot of things that work into the data quality or data integrity conversation. I think for us, there's kind of three things that we look at and we utilize whenever we're running research. And it starts before someone even enters in the survey. So taking a look at geo fingerprinting, looking at the type of device or browser that the individual is using, and seeing does that make sense based upon the requirements or criteria of the study. Are they meeting kind of those baseline components? And I think a lot of times that's where we're catching some of that really bad actor type of respondents before they even enter in the survey, capturing those individuals. Then once they're in the study, I think it's a combination of using red herrings or questions that would be pertinent to the type of respondent that you would want in your survey. And then also leveraging technology like AI is now a great source to use for looking at relevance and sentiment for open-ended responses. So we can look in real time to see whether the question that's being asked versus the answer that's being given, does that make sense based upon the context of the survey itself? And lastly, I know we beat this we beat this drum all the time as an industry, but I think just staying on top of survey design is a big thing as well, right? Making sure that your survey is as engaging as possible, and just making sure that whatever we're asking of the respondent in terms of time commitment, the questions that we're asking is fair and can elicit the type of responses that we're looking for.
Very good. Thank you. Pete, anything you'd like to add or expand upon?
Yeah, I think
with this question?
It all boils down to the fundamentals of a B2B survey has a higher incentive rate than a consumer. And so therefore, sadly, the fraud levels are going to be far higher in the B2B space than they are in the B2C. And this is where we've got so much pressure on making sure we clean that data. I'm sure Steve is of the same opinion as me. We have to clean as much of that data out as possible. We've got manual checks at the back end that we do here at B2B International, but we also, some of that early start is to look at how many surveys an IP address has taken in the last 24 hours. And some of those figures is mind-blowing that we've seen on some of the data that's kind of come back to us. Someone's taken 342 surveys on their IP in that last 24-hour time period. It really gives us a nervousness that well, they're definitely never included in our studies, but they're even been allowed through others. And it's all about really cracking down and using that technology to make sure we champion and give good quality data to our clients.
Very good. So I'm making some notes here, and the things that I'm pulling so far from the three of you, I'm hearing a lot about trust and credibility being put into the process. I'm hearing a lot about survey design. And Pete, you just touched on, the incentives for B2B sample, invite more suspicious respondents. And then technology, there's some AI mentioned. There was some technology mentioned by you as well, Pete. I think maybe to get the panel perspective at this point, Ashu, we can kick it to you. And aside from these points, adding in that layer of what is good for a panel company to be doing, and we can maybe speak to IRB's process with the respondent lifecycle management, recruitment, maintaining good quality, adhering to standards in the industry as well. Why don't you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Doug. So, basically, if you look at this quality thing from a panel perspective, it's always a kind of, cat and mouse race. The technology is evolving so much. You have a number of checks in place that you think is going to help you out to flag them down. But in a month and so you come to know like those are not relevant anymore. So it's something like at a technology point of view, I would say like when it comes to panel recruitment, then the recruitment is the key. Like when a user comes into the pool, what are the checks, measures are being taken, and not only completely reliable on the online checks that we are tracking, but the manual process does help us to, get more confidence in the respondents and in the quality. When specifically we are talking about B2B, because that's what we have been doing for more than a decade. And it has been a challenge a lot of time, as Pete mentioned. The incentives is one of the crucial things that we have to be very careful, because sometimes the too high incentive and too low incentive both can screw up the data, because if it is too low, then you might get uh, you know I mean the sources can be compromised at sometimes, and people might lose the interest in your survey. So if we talk about the panel recruitment process, what we at RB believe, we mainly focus on engagement and elimination process, and both needs to be done parallelly. So I mean, obviously, we make sure that we track all the information for our user based on IP, the source information, along with how they're responding, recruit their behavior in responding to questions for panel categorization, or maybe the profile building, or whenever they come to any future survey, how they're responding. So developing their survey behavior, their profile information, their verification score. We club all those information all together, and we try to make sure that we get high quality, or maybe the best quality data for online surveys. I mean, these days, one of the challenges that we are facing is the open end, which is, a kind of pain for the industry, for all of us, because that is something that's very difficult to track until you read them manually. Now, what's happening? The responses are coming AI written, so they're so perfect. It's very difficult to differentiate. We have been also we have been experimenting, and maybe we are going to work on a pilot project where we identify the AI responses. So we are using another AI to identify whether the response is being put in is AI generated or it's manually, and do a scoring based on that, so that it can help us to at an extent to identify the user. So I mean, I think it's a great challenge, and it's a continuous efforts from a panel side to be at the top of the quality. And whenever I mean, from if you talk about the life cycle from panel recruitment to the in delivery, when something goes wrong, I mean everything comes to panel agency. So the panel companies have a lot of responsibility and a challenge to address such issues, and we try to do best with the help of technology and our internal process. I mean, sorry I took a little longer, but I just want to explain the entire spectrum of it.
No, thank you for that. And I think what we'll do is I'm going to ask you another question, and then we'll go back up the ladder of the life cycle from panel all the way up to Anastasia. So you being, obviously the president of the company, what processes do you have in place to ensure that the data we're getting from panel is legitimate? Is there a process in place, whether you're getting reports or you're doing certain checks with the teams? Can you explain a little bit of that process, and then we'll move back upward?
Yeah, so basically, the process is like first we need to figure out, the recruitment sources where we are getting respondents. And first, the process that we follow is recruit all the respondents are coming from different sources. Then first do the real-time check and flag them out and toss them out. Second, like we have an internal team who goes through the responses individually for all the panel members, and then based on the manual uh, flagging, we also remove the panelists. And we also, layer with them. We obviously we have a lot of privacy related compliance where we cannot ask a lot of information from the users. But what we do, we try to engage the panelists, or we want to tell them that, hey, just verify your LinkedIn profile or verify your work email, give you some extra, bonus or incentive, or maybe another, and an opportunity, the first opportunity to participate in a high-end research survey. So that helps us to verify some of the responses, and that's how we keep, you know, uh, improving the confidence in quality of the practice. So it's a long journey. Obviously, at each step there are some, uh, processes in place, but that's the, I mean, in a brief, that's how we.
Yes, great. So Pete, let's go to you. Maybe, when you're working with panel providers on your end, some of those same types of checks are in place. Is there anything else when you're going to stakeholders or you're getting ready to go to clients and need to run it by whoever you need to run it by? Is there anything else you're adding, or is it similar? Give some thoughts on that, please.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing we should also do is to keep a panel clean and compliant is sometimes keep certain projects off a panel. There are certain types of people that go to panel and are part of large panels that IRB offer. But sometimes there's just target audiences in the B2B space that need a different approach. And we're lucky at B2B International to be able to offer every single method. But panel is such an integral part of what everybody expects from the wider remit of cost and keeping things in the right areas of their own budget and what they require. But if we only look at a project and go, this target audience is definitely going to be on panel, they're sat at their desk. They're a person who isn't going to be a farmer in a field who you can get on panel, but it's harder to kind of encourage them and get that spend with them. So you've got to really just look at it and go, is this a project that we should be putting in this arena? And when it is, it's all about kind of just writing those great questions that Steve has already spoken about, of the logic checks that we have at the start. And I suppose one of the factors that B2B faces is we do use lots of different sources. We're looking at maybe recruit to web as another method to try and get people to do an online survey, because we might be looking at a MaxDiff or a conjoint that is difficult to administer on the telephone. And so we need to make sure those people are verified and included. And have kind of gone through those particular checks, and that's where we've got different routes that kind of come into our surveys. We're always kind of putting forward encrypted links. It's basic things, but it's just making sure that those nobody can guess what the next link can be. I mean, I was looking at data today where it was a different panel, but it had come through, and it's not individual rows that were the problem, it's the collective rows. So it's when you start to look at what does everybody say to the brand question of which 3 words come to mind when you think of these brands. The words didn't make sense in the context. They weren't wrong words. They just said something like best, better, worse, or something like that. But it's not really answering the question. And there were banks of these same phrases. We're looking at timestamps. When are somebody completing them? I think if we're talking about fraudulent farms, we're talking about people who are sat in front of multiple computers. They're not speeding anymore. They're going through multiple surveys and taking their time. So we're really trying to put ourselves in their shoes as the fraudsters and going, well, what would they do? And the big push that we're really going for is around how do the practices that we see in the banking industry come into some more in the market research industry? Sadly, no one's going to end up in prison for doing a bad survey, whereas if you did fraud in the banking industry, you would. So we have to try and take some of their technology and implement that. And yeah, there's a lot of things which are happening. How do we pay them? Where are we paying them? Are we paying them in the same IP location that they said they were based in the survey? And so all of those types of things are really at the paramount forefront of what needs to happen. So yeah, so that's kind of our approach to all of this.
Very good. Thank you. Steve, is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Well, Pete made a lot of great points there, and I'm glad you brought up the topic of using different methodologies, because you'd be surprised how many people just restrict their search to online, and there's a bunch of other options out there, and it's all pertinent to the right respondent and audience that you're going after. But I think one other thing that we look at a lot, and Pete kind of touched on it, is sample composition and how it changes over time, especially when we're doing tracking work or wave work. I think one of the big challenges that we have right now is we have ways that we can weed out some poor data quality, whether it's in survey questions or doing some of those checks pre-survey. But where we're seeing more time taken on our side and working with clients is looking at data and changes wave over wave, and trying to determine how much of that is actually occurring out there because of changes that are happening in the environment or changes that are happening with the product or service, or how much is this being injected by panels and the composition of those panels. So a lot of our time on the reporting side is spent there, going back and forth, reviewing previous data and just trying to see how much of that is noise and how much can we remove versus what we're actually seeing in field.
Very good. Yes, thank you. All right, so Anastasia, we've heard from kind of the in the weeds from Ashu, and then in the middle of the weeds, maybe the top of the weeds from Steve and Pete. And so you had mentioned in the beginning how when you're working with teams internally, a lot of them are either not fully up to speed on research approaches or understanding what's required. And so I'm wondering how many of these factors that we've talked about play into getting buy-in from shareholders on your end, or do you take that information and portray it in a different way or use it to back up a certain approach that you take? Could you kind of explain, your process in getting that trust?
Well, for me, first of all, trust starting with something that I need to buying in and believing in, and exactly starting with a reliable panelists, reliable respondents. It's the only way that I can really approach my stakeholders, I will call them internal clients, with insights and with recommendations. So I'll tell you the truth. Research in B2B is only with a bigger, just in any space. The industry is growing. Why? Because it's very, very important that it's space when companies like, for example, my FMCG company, we can get better margin. We can really make sure that we really have bigger plans around that. If we have bigger plans, we need to make sure that we have less risks because we're investing more in this space. How to have less risks, to make sure that whatever data is provided for this space is reliable. So of course we've got multiple sources of information. But I'll be very honest with you, it's very fragmented, and we're really relying on you guys as data providers, people who are really helping us to go through all this, foggy environment, really to understand what's exactly the truth and how we can really use it and make actionable plans and avoid risks as much as possible. For example, in my previous role, I was leading insights and analytics function for one of the biggest roofing manufacturer in the world. And big decisions we had to make. What's the optimal mix for a new factory in Saudi we were opening? Again, it's the only way, just if I was absolutely sure that I am talking to right panelists, to right respondents about, it was architects, it was contractors, it was all the business owners in this particular in Gulf region, to make sure that I am really kind of confident I will be able to convince my stakeholders. So in a nutshell, I believe that it's very fragmented and it's really you and believing that the data what you're providing that is reliable is really helping us to avoid risks and make sure we're spreading the word around the company and making sure that we are making right decisions.
Very good. Thank you. And you know, a lot of themes, we're coming up on time here, but I'm hearing a lot of themes about trust and process and having a rigorous and consistent approach to keeping data quality. We're hearing some things about technologies being used, but at the end of the day, it sounds like from the bottom up, it's all about putting trust in the data and having that trust in people that are doing the right things in order to deliver internally, from Ashu to Pete and Steve, and from Pete and Steve all the way up to Anastasia. So it sounds, I'm hearing a lot of good themes, consistent themes from everyone, which is really helpful. And I think, it goes back to also the human touch, right? We're trying to work with people who are actually humans on the panel and how we validate that. And so these seem to be, a lot of the current trends. And I'll open this to everyone because this will be our last question. Does anyone have any thoughts on future trends that they might see that'll impact data quality or the way we do things, maybe streamline some of that fragmentation Anastasia mentioned on the end client side? Any of this in market research? Any thoughts from the panel? I'll leave it open to anyone.
I mean, so many things here, Doug, because we are at a crossroads of such change, and we're really kind of looking at all these technologies that are at the outset, but it's trusting in them. It goes back to those fundamentals. We have this whole session talking about clean and compliant. We need to put the respondents back at the heart of doing research again. Those surveys need to be faster, more engaging. And why would people take all these surveys when we kind of keep dragging 25-minute conversations out of them for very little benefit? What is that carrot? What is the incentive that really gets them out of bed in the morning to help us? And the big issue we've got is all around the kind of GDPR that kind of came in, stopped people from being made aware for all good reasons, but it stops kind of Anastasia from then having the trust easily because you can't see who those people are anymore. If you could tell her that you'd spoken to her 5 biggest kind of parts of the journey, she would go, this is brilliant, but we can't anymore. So we have to try and peel all those aspects back. And that's where the technology comes in. That's where hopefully we kind of make things more fun and engaging. And it's a long road. There's definitely going to be lots of kind of hiccups along the way, but yeah, we're here to kind of get to that stage eventually.
Thank you, Pete. We are at 3 minutes now, so let's get into the Q&A here quickly. Let's pick a question. Ashu, this will be for you. Someone wants to hear about the B2B profiles that you feel are not suitable for online panel. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So basically, there's some sectors, if you go to, sometimes you see that you are getting projects from mining, I don't think that's a very suited profile for B2B projects. Sometimes, in industry people do it, but again, that's a questionable many times. So there are some, industry which is not explored or maybe exposed to internet yet. And they don't spend. There's certain industry you see they spend a lot of time on technology, on LinkedIn. Those industries are definitely the right fit for online surveys. But if you talk about the industry, aerospace, the sciences, if you have to recruit people, the roof makers. So there are certain audiences who are not very much exposed to online. So I would say like those are the industry when we have a project, we definitely need to think from a hybrid approach or maybe the CATI approach and very less online approach. We have seen, because we have seen examples, we got wrong projects into the online and the quality was worse. And it's not because of the sampling, it's not because of the questionnaire, it's just because of the wrong methodology.
Thank you. Time for one more question. Someone had asked if Ashu, before you were talking about using AI to check the open-ended questions, I'm actually going to pivot this to Steve, who wrote a book called AI Empowered. So I think if you can give us a 30-second AI spiel about open-end checks live, it's all you.
Well, AI, I tell you, it's growing in power day by day. We use it on all of our studies right now. We look at a couple of things. So we look at relevance to the question being asked versus the answer being provided. And then we also look at the sentiment. So whether it's positive, negative, neutral. And when we're storing that, we're essentially storing it as variables in the study, then we can use it to redirect. So whether that's skip logic, term logic, we can ask follow-up questions. It's really given us another tool in our arsenal to not only just terminate and remove bad quality data, but also further flush in and refine and ask follow-up questions where there might be some misinterpretation of the question or some gray area there. So I think it's a really great tool, and if you're not currently using it, it's something that you should consider adding to your arsenal. How's that for 30 seconds?
Nailed it. And with that, we're going to conclude the webinar. Thanks again to everyone for joining. Thanks to our panel for being part of the conversation. We at IRB will make this webinar available. If you'd also like it to be sent to you directly, we can email it, but it'll be posted online. And we'll have more of these coming up in the coming months. So thanks again. And I hope everyone enjoyed the conversation and look forward to seeing you all next time.
Cheers, everyone. Really enjoyable.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.